Hey guys, this is Dave with Audio In, and today I'm going to be reviewing an IEM that's actually been out for a while now. I think it was released around October or November last year, so it's been out for about a year. And the IEM I'm referring to is the SeeAudio Bravery Angelears Edition. And I have not heard the original Bravery, so I don't know the difference between this one and the original in terms of tuning, aside from what I've seen on graphs. But I have spent the better part of a month listening to and comparing these to other IEMs, and I have some things that I like about the Bravery Angelears Edition, and some things, well, I absolutely love. Okay, let's go over what's included in the box. Of course, we have the IEMs and Hakuge cable, and the cable being modular, they've also included 3.5, 2.5, and 4.4 balanced interchangeable terminations. Also included is a simple, hard protective case and a very nice assortment of ear tips, including some foam ear tips, but also some Sedna EarFit X-Elastic ear tips. As for the price, specifications, and design, the Bravery AE comes in at $299, and it has a 4 balanced armature driver configuration. The drivers are housed in a resin shell, and I have the blue version, but they are also available in red, or you can actually get one blue and one red if you want to kind of mix the colors. And if you look closely at the faceplate, it's almost as though it has a shifting gradient, but what's cool is if they catch the light just right, you can see that there's a little bit of depth and dimension to the design as well. It really is eye-catching. It's very beautiful. As for fit and comfort, it's good as far as the shell size and shape. However, I did have some issues with ear pressure, especially when I was using the X-Elastic ear tips. In the end, though, I was able to correct the issue simply by swapping over to the Divinus Velvet ear tips, and I also had pretty good luck with the Z-Review's render tips as well, which is what I have on them right now. And then moving on to the cable, as I had mentioned previously, this is a Hakuge cable. It's a 2-pin cable, and it has a 6N OCC copper construction with a nylon outer jacketing, and again, it is modular, so you can choose between a 3.5, 4.4, and 2.5 termination. Now, as far as the cable design, I do wish they would have maybe used something other than black to match the IEM just a little bit better, but it's still very nice. And honestly, the thing that really caught my attention initially anyway was the craftsmanship and just the quality and construction of the cable. In addition, it's also very soft, quite manageable, so it's easy to roll up and store. Okay, let's move on to the sound. Okay, let's talk about the sound of the Bravery AE. Its overall presentation is what I would consider to be a very mild V-shape. So there is just enough additional emphasis in the bass and treble to kind of slightly push it out of the neutral territory and edge it ever so slightly into the V-shaped territory. But the mid-range tuning approach they took is a little bit different from a lot of the other more upper mid forward tuned IEMs, and it takes a similar approach to the upper mid-range tuning of, say, the SA6, SA6 MK2, and Ultra. So it has a slight reduction in the ear gain region. And I think the Performer 5 and Performer 8 kind of have a similar upper mid tuning as well. And just a side note, all of the IEMs I just mentioned hold top spots as far as overall performance in their price range for me. But the Bravery AE does take a little bit of a departure when we get into the tuning of the lower mids and bass, with it having some additional low mid and mid bass presence. So it's going to have a little more warmth in its vocal and instrument presentation. But let's go ahead and break the sound down a little further, and then we'll circle back to some comparisons at the end. Starting with the bass, the Bravery AE's bass extension is excellent. However, the overall bass quantity is just slightly above what I would consider to be neutral, with some of the extra bass presence coming from the mid bass frequencies. So it doesn't have the typical bass shelf below 200 to 250 hertz that you have with a lot of these other IEMs that I have on the table. So that additional low, mid, and mid bass presence, while adding some nice warm tones and richness to vocals and instruments, can also sometimes maybe not sound quite as controlled as, again, some of the competition that I have out here. However, that's not to say it necessarily sounds uncontrolled, because somehow they did manage to keep enough mid-bass texture and low-mid detail to keep it from falling into that muddy territory. And I think they struck a very nice balance between the two, between the warmth and that low-mid detail. And of course, this being an all-BA driver IEM, it's not going to have the same kind of dynamic presentation you would get from, say, a dynamic driver IEM, but I have to say they did do a good job. It does have really good slam and good dynamics for it being a balanced armature set. And then as you move into the mids, of course, this has, again, it has that mild V-shaped tuning, so you do have a little bit of a reduction in the mid-range, but it's not too much as to bury vocals. So vocals and instruments are going to have a smoother presentation, again, similar to what you might have with the SA6, MK2, or the Ultra, but they do still have enough presence as to keep the listener engaged and maintain a strong front and center focus. Another problem you can sometimes run into with V-shaped tuned IEMs is sometimes instrument and vocals can sound a little bit unnatural. But again, I think the Bravery AE has avoided that, and it still manages to maintain a very natural overall presentation. And then as you move into the treble, the two attributes that kind of stood out to me during my first few listening sessions were how clean it was and also how well it was extended. And I don't think it's overly bright, but there is definitely a little bit of extra treble energy there, but I think it's needed for a couple of reasons. First, because it helps kind of keep the overall presentation balanced, since it does have, again, it has that extra mid-bass presence. Second, it reveals a lot of detail and some of those more subtle micro nuances. So hi-hats have really good sizzle, cymbals have good energy and decay, but never sound splashy or uncontrolled. And in addition, there's also excellent treble extension past 10K, so you have nice amounts of air and sparkle. And then finally, as for its technical capabilities, I would say it's very good. And I think its detail levels were one of the things that kind of impressed me the most. I don't think it's quite as detailed as, say, the Performer 8 or Studio 4. And I know those are more expensive, and maybe that's not a fair comparison, but I don't know. I do think they're close enough to warrant comparison. However, I also think it does edge out the Dunu Falcon Ultra. But just in terms of detail, the soundstage is also fairly wide as far as IEMs go. It also has good imaging and instrument separation for this price point. Again, falling short of something like the Performer 8 or Studio 4, but comparable to the Cara and the Orchestra Lite and even the Falcon Ultra. Now, in terms of its overall value and where I feel that it stands when compared to the competition, again, in terms of technical performance, it's quite good for this price range. Now, as far as how it competes in terms of tuning, that's a little harder to say, because obviously it depends on your tuning preference. I can tell you that I do like the upper mid-range and treble tuning. However, I do still prefer the bass tuning of something, again, like the Performer 8, Orchestra Lite, and even the Cara. That being said, even though the IEM landscape for this price range has changed since the Bravery AE's release, I do still think it's relevant. as far as its overall performance. And while I do think it's pushing it a little in terms of pricing, I think I kind of understand why they priced it the way they did, with this being a special edition set and having the upgraded cable. But here's the bottom line. This is a very solid IEM in terms of both technical performance and tuning, even though it doesn't necessarily fit my tuning preference exactly. And it's also just a very well-rounded package as far as its build quality, design, and its presentation in general. And again, even though I do think they may be pushing the price just a little bit, I think that overall it is worth that price, and it's a very solid IEM. And for it still to be relevant in today's IEM market with all the new releases, I think that's pretty cool. So that concludes my review of the SeeAudio Bravery Angelears Edition. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. If you like my content, please take a second and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you would please like this video, please share this video. I hope you guys have an awesome day.